Hi guys, Steve here with a tournament report for you this time. Again, I haven't been posting much on the channel recently, but recently three of us, Marcel, Leon and I, went to a local tournament, and we hopefully will all be posting videos about how we did at the tournament in the near future. This one's my one. So it was a 3-game tournament, 16 players. Neither Leon, myself or Marcel played each other, so we all played out with different people. And yeah, this is how I did. So really at this tournament, my priority was testing out my Nemo 3 list with 2 Storm Striders. It's a pretty exciting list to get to try out. So I did take a second list, which is my normal Maddox list, but basically decided that the only time I was going to play that is if I came up against Signar and possibly against Marcel's Trolls, just in case he dropped Gunbjorn up against Nemo 3. That might be a bad matchup for me. It might be playable, but we'll have to see maybe at some point in the future. But I'm not going to bother telling you what my Maddox list was. It's on lots of my other videos. And as I say, the point was just to try out this Nemo list. So even if I thought it wasn't a great matchup, I still dropped it just in case, just in order to test it out. So for example, up against Kador, I think my Maddox list might generally do a little bit better, but I just really wanted to test this list out. So the list itself is Nemo 3, and he's got a Squire attached to him. He's in heavy metal, by the way. Yeah, he's got a Squire attached to him, and his battle group is Dynamo and a Firefly and a Lancer. Then we've also got a Journeyman Warcaster with another Firefly attached. So we've got Jakes with Thunderhead attached. We've got Strange Ways, and then we've got 2 Storm Striders. So this is a list I've been working on for a while. It took me a while to get the Storm Striders collected. It's not very well painted, unfortunately, but I managed to get it up to at least the 3 colour standard just for the tournament. Got all the bases marked and everything. And it's a pretty brutal attrition list. It's been pointed out to me that it doesn't have a very good scenario game, and I think that's pretty true because each and every piece is pretty valuable. There's nothing here that I can really give up to sacrifice just to score scenario points. Without significantly losing a lot of the punch of the list. But yeah, it's got an excellent attrition potential. A feat turn can be absolutely brutal. And it's got plenty of arm cracking, and it can deal with infantry as well. So anyway, let's get straight into the first game. So I drew up against a Kador player, someone I've not had the pleasure of playing before, although his list was very similar to Leon's Harkevitch list. So I don't know the details of each of the lists I played up against, but I can give you a general idea. So this is a Harkevitch list, and a lot of Harkevitch players here in Europe are waiting for the Greylord Farseers to come out. So a lot of people playing with they would not consider to be optimized lists. So yeah, this was a Harkevitch list. I think it definitely had Behemoth in it. I think it had 3 Kodiaks, which is fairly standard for Harkevitch for that Cloud Wall. And I believe it had Marauder and a couple of Juggernauts as well, and I can see a couple of those axe wielding guys, and I think a pair of assassins there as well. And I managed to roll first turn, so I've got a fairly standard deployment set up for this list, and obviously getting that extended deployment area is pretty good. Generally I just put the Lancer in the center, and then I flank it with Thunderhead and Dynamo. Flank them with the Fireflies, and then the Storm Striders go on the outside. And what that allows me to do is get those lights a little bit further up, because they're a little bit more disposable than the heavies and the Storm Striders. It also allows me to get the Fireflies into position as required to increase the power of all the electric shooting, and it also allows me to get the Lancer up pretty fast, either to cast spells on my guys or to get those Force Hammer slams set up early on in the game on my opponent's guys. So the photo I've got here is just after my first turn, so I just ran everything up. Yeah, so I got first turn, so I didn't choose the sides of the table, so I can't tell you too much about that. Other than, yeah, I just deployed centrally, not thinking too much about scenario at this point, because up against that Harkevitch list, I really need to concentrate on trying to take down as many heavies as I can before the lines join up. Here's what my opponent did on his first turn. Obviously, he got his tramples off, and he set those Kodiaks up to drop their smoke walls to block my line of sight to all of his list. So that was kind of annoying. It kind of stopped me from doing that alpha strike shooting, which I guess you kind of have to expect. People not wanting to just get shot off the table in the first turn, or on the top of turn 2. You might notice that there's a Juggernaut on the right here sticking out. Everyone else is, all the little guys have got stealth, so I'm not going to be shooting them very easily. So he was very careful to position those outside of my walking and within 5 inches of ignoring stealth range. And yes, that Juggernaut is sticking out on its own. That's the only thing I've got line of sight to that I can actually shoot. So that's something that I'm going to be trying to pick off on my turn. Also, I've got the Firefly hiding behind a building there, and I've got Dynamo hiding up there as well, and also Nemo's heading towards behind that building just in case I need to block line of sight to him. So that building is going to be my central point for Nemo if I decide that I don't just want to sit on the deployment line, which is actually probably a better idea most of the time for him. He gets assassinated very easily. He is very squishy. So here's what I did on my turn. So this is where I did probably one of my biggest mistakes at the tournament. So what I did was I spotted that I could get my Lancer up into his clouds, and then I would be able to use the Force Hammer spell to slam Behemoth over the top of Harkevitch, try and knock both of them down. And I kind of misunderstood at that point what Iron Sentinel does on Harkevitch and how it interacts with slam mechanics. So what should have happened was that Behemoth should have been slammed across Harkevitch, but because of Iron Sentinel and the fact that he gets knocked down by a slam as he comes into contact with Behemoth as he moves across him, then he shouldn't have been knocked down, but he should have got a damage roll, and Behemoth should have been quite a long way behind him and knocked down. But I didn't understand any of that at the time, so I have to admit ignorance in this case. So I ended up not rolling my damage rolls as I should have, and that meant that my Lancer was just sat there in front of his army, not looking very clever at this point. The other thing I tried to do was I tried to shoot the Juggernaut and try to go for that critical disruption from the Storm Striders, and although I boosted all of my attack rolls, I didn't get any crits, so that was a little bit sad. I did do some damage to the Juggernaut because I was able to also boost damage on some of those rolls, but I didn't do anything near crippling, and didn't take out his movement or his cortex or his axe arm. So he's still a pretty high effectiveness, I think, at this point. Other than that, I'm just trying to play for position a little bit, just try and keep everyone outside of those 10-inch threat ranges from all of those Kador Jacks with Harkevitch's mobility, and just try and get as many models into zones as I could. So here's what my opponent did. Another cloud wall's gone down, so because he couldn't get to me with his charges, so the best thing he could do was get his cloud walls down and feet, and that prevented me from doing much damage if I decided to feet on my turn. That swing of 3 armor is pretty amazing, especially when it comes to Kador Jacks. It makes them very difficult to kill individually and almost impossible to kill multiples of them. Over on the right hand side, he's charged he charged his Juggernaut into the Storm Strider. Not sure if he did any attacks. If he did, then he would have got pushed backwards. I think maybe he took half the health off the Storm Strider from what I remember. This is already fading in my memory, unfortunately. But yeah, he certainly didn't get to destroy the Storm Strider with that Juggernaut. And then everything else is played quite fairly defensively. His little small base models are creeping around the edges, looking to score on those flags, and also try to get round towards Nemo, and also try and spread out a little bit and get in those zones, just to make it difficult for me to remove them, making sure they're not within 4 inches of each other for those electro leaps as well. Otherwise he's just giving up free models basically. So yeah, I think on this turn my opponent was scoring on his square zone and on his flag as well, so it looks like he's already up by 2 points on me at this point. And again, yeah, this list's scenario weaknesses starting to become more apparent, although I probably could have played my left-hand Storm Strider a little bit wider and a little bit further up the board. There's something I did learn from during this tournament, and it's something I'll take away from this tournament, is that Storm Striders can be played as scenario pieces, And at a distance, at the limits of people's charge ranges, it's quite handy to do that. So if they do try and charge in, then they get pushed away. They only ever get one attack against those guys. So here's my turn, and yeah, I feated, starting to panic a little bit because his feat turn has basically nullified my feat turn. As you can see, I did manage to finish off that Juggernaut on the right, but apart from that, I didn't do any other major killing. Despite having a Firefly in there, Thunderhead's gone in there and pulsed. Dynamo's gone in there, and I don't think he's managed to kill anything. No, he's still got 5 jacks in there. So yeah, it's all in all, it's not going especially well on the attrition. It's certainly a bit of a waste of a feat turn. So it was a bit of a mess of a game, really, and I'm not really playing my best. I was making mistakes and then spotting them as I was making them. Yeah, lots of errors, and yeah, generally could have played a lot better. Over on the right is a bit more successful. Managed to score a point on my zone. Managed to take down those 2 little assassin dudes and finish off that Juggernaut, I think, with Nemo and the Storm Strider and Finch. Left-hand Storm Strider still not really being very relevant in scenario, although he is contesting my flag, so he's stopping him from scoring on there. I think maybe I shot down his little axe guy who was standing on that flag with him. So yeah, I'm not losing a lot of pieces, but I'm not getting ahead on scenario here, and my opponent scored on that zone again, also scored on the flag, and what that means is he's now I believe 2 points ahead or 3 points ahead. So actually all he has to do is sit in his zones and score another couple of points, and then he won on scenario. So yeah, pretty disappointing start, really. As before, I was aiming for a couple of wins and 1 loss, and this is starting off with a loss, as I often do. It's pretty disappointing, and especially as I could see how badly I was playing as I was playing it, and especially as it was a list that I was quite experienced against, with Leon playing it quite often as well. But my opponent played a solid defensive game. I was very cautious, and yeah, just managed to keep scoring those points on scenario when I could have easily probably prevented him from doing so. So yeah, moving on to my next game. This is what it looked like. This time I managed to take a photo of a deployment, and once again I got first turn, and this time I was up against a Circle Army. I think it's Kaya 2, with Loki and Getorix, and a Feral Warp Wolf and a Pureblood Warp Wolf. He's got the Shifting Stones in there. He's got a couple of Sentry Stones with Mannequins. He's got the Gallows Grove and a couple of other solos. Fury Management, probably Gobber Chef is in there as well. So yeah, so my plan against, as you can see, this scenario is a scenario that's very bad for my list, because there's flags, which I can score with solos, but it probably involve them dying because they're so close to the front line, and I cannot score those circle zones at all. I don't have any units in my list. Yeah, so it's a bit of a problem, so I'm really going to be pushing for attrition, and obviously getting first turn is pretty big for me to get that. My opponent chose the side he's on, presumably because of the trench there. Kaya's big thing is her feet, which means that she can run all those fast wolves in, do a lot of damage, and then feet them all back into safety and surround herself to prevent people getting assassinated. Any problem with that feat is that kind of is a bit of a problem on scenario, because it means that your war beast won't be in any zones. In this case, it shouldn't be too much of a problem, because he'll only be scoring with his units, not his war beasts in his battle group, and solos. So there's nothing here that his war beast can score anyway. But yeah, so lots of juicy mannequins there for my Electro Leaps to take down, so I'm looking forward to doing that. So yeah, here's my first turn. Deployment was the same as I described before, with the Lancer in the middle, then Thunderhead and the Dynamo, then the 2 Fireflies, and then the 2 Storm Striders working from the centre outwards, with all the solos up behind them. Yeah. So it's my first turn, really just trying to... There's so much terrain on the tables in this tournament. I like a lot of terrain, but this was quite a lot of terrain, I would have to say. But those Storm Striders are set up to ignore that piece of water there on the left and the rough terrain on the right. There's a nice forest here waiting for Nemo to sit behind, to stop him getting assassinated. So that's quite nice. And everything else is just squeezing up between that water and the forest. Luckily, there's just enough room. My lights are fast enough to get through there on the first turn, and then there's just enough room for Thunderhead and Dynamo to stand in the gap behind them. Yeah, one thing that's worth mentioning is Thunderhead on Jake's seems to be a really good combination. When I'm up against, so Thunderhead is really wants to be up the front, but survivability is a bit of an issue for him. He's armor 19, which is pretty good, and he has a few extra boxes than Signar Jacks generally have. But he is got relatively short range shooting, and his pulse is very destructive, but quite short range as well. So he does want to be up the front generally, maybe just behind a Firefly in most cases. And Jake's really helps with that. So she can cast Energizer and get him to move up an extra couple of inches, which quite often throws people off when they're calculating their threat ranges when they know he's only speed 5. And the other thing she does is give him Sidekick, which is your standard first turn casting and then upkeeping. As you go forward through the game, and Sidekick is pretty great because it has no knockdown, just like the rest of this list, in fact, apart from the Firefly that's on the junior. But it's no knockdown, no push, no movement from slams, which is really great. But the main thing it gives is +2 defense, so it moves him from defense 12 to defense 14, which Circle players will know as they have that on their Warp Wolves, is just a brilliant number for a heavy. Because he's generally going to be up against Mat 6 and 7 heavies to take him down, and they generally should be boosting against defense 14. And because they're boosting against defense 14, they are not getting the number of attacks that they probably need to take him down. So generally speaking, Thunderhead at defense 14 needs 2 heavies if they really want to commit to taking him down. Which is pretty good, and coupled with the amount of destruction he can create on feet turn, it seems like he's quite good at initiating that attrition game. So anyway, so that's by the by. So I'm just waiting for my opponent to move his lovely small based guys up for me to shoot down. Yeah, it looks like I'm probably going to get a turn 2 feet turn this turn. We'll see what happens. So here we go. Either my opponent can stay back and just disadvantage himself hugely on scenario, or he can move his stuff up and then hope that I are not able to take out too much of it on my feet turn. So that's what he did. He's got his forest up on his sentry stones, which gives them stealth, that makes them a little bit more difficult to remove for my guns. But it's all up within range really of what I can walk and shoot, so I'm going to have a pretty decent feet turn here. So that's what I did, and as you can see, I managed to take off Getorix, in fact. So over on the left hand side there, I was able to get lots of shots into Getorix. I was also able to get Thunderhead to take his shots, and took out tons and tons of mannequins. Sentry stones are still there, so the mannequins are going to keep on coming back, but they kind of die incidentally to my electroleap damages anyway, so they're not causing too much of a problem for me. Just concentrating on taking down those heavies. I went for Getorix first. He's the obvious choice because he would be so useful against killing my army. And I think I didn't roll great for feet turn because that is all the main thing I managed to take away is Getorix. I think I did some damage to the Warp Wolf on the left there, and Loki remained untouched because he had stealth. Kaya too's got a stealth for her battle group spell, which is incredibly powerful for Circle. It really does protect them against shooting quite nicely. And unfortunately, because of my positioning with Thunderhead, I was able to get him within pulse range, but only just, and that meant that he wasn't within 5 inches, and so he still had stealth, so my pulse still missed, unfortunately. Over on the right hand side, I didn't manage to do too much damage to that other Warp Wolf, but I did take out some of the support models that were surrounding him, the mannequins and such. Overall a pretty good feet turn. So my opponent decided that was time to go for his feet turn. And as I was explaining with Thunderhead, he fell for that exactly. He also rolled pretty atrociously trying to take down Thunderhead with his Warp Wolves. I believe he took down my Firefly that was on the left-hand side, and the Firefly that was on the right-hand side, so they're both gone. But yeah, he wasn't able to take down Thunderhead, unfortunately. And then he defeated with Kaya, which meant that all of his remaining Warp Wolves all got sucked back, teleported across over towards that trench, and he's still got that stealth spell up, so that allowed me to it makes it very difficult for me to take him down from distance. So yeah, he's really withdrawn from the scenario quite a lot here. He's really only left some stuff that I should find very easy to kill over on the left hand side of the board, and all of his heavies with all their killing potential are over on the right, and yeah, not really doing much to contest those zones. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well on attrition here, and I'm not really worried about him overpowering me on scenario, but I could now concentrate on getting some points on my flag. And I think maybe he might have actually scored a point on his flag at this point, because I can see a solo sitting there. Anyway, so, oh yeah, and it's worth mentioning that here is, I think it's Laris. Kaya's dog is hiding up behind one of my Stormstriders here. That comes into it a bit later. So I decided to push my advantage and really try and beat him down on attrition, trying to prevent him from having any chance whatsoever. So yeah, I was very aggressive with my Stormstrider on the right. They've actually got a pretty deceptive threat range because they can charge, and then because they have dual attack, they can then move in and then continue shooting after having charged. So that extends their threat range significantly, and they also have no problem shooting while they're in melee. Then I've got, I almost went for an assassination, in fact, with Thunderhead. This is the other dimension to Thunderhead, is if their Warcaster or Warlock is planning on playing forward, they have to be very careful not to get into his pulse range, because his pulse ignores those intervening models. It doesn't ignore terrain, but it ignores models, and it hits automatically. So you can get some pretty decent shooting off on, and certainly would have, she's got very high defense, Kaya too, but he certainly would have been able to finish her off with his with the damage from his pulses and then the sustained attack on his additional attacks. Unfortunately, I was about a quarter of an inch out, and his flag was actually preventing me from positioning in the perfect spot to be able to pull that off. So it didn't happen, but I still managed to take down another one of his Warp Wolves. The Lancer was in there ready to cause problems on the following turn with the slams. And yep, so generally I think Dynamo went in and actually was the one that took down the Warp Wolf. He's pretty hard to see. You can just see his spear poking out from behind the left-hand Stormstrider. So yeah, at this point feeling pretty good. I don't see that there's any real way that the Squire is now scoring on my zone. I'm preventing him from scoring on his on the flag. I'm preventing him from scoring on his flag, occupying the two zones. So I don't really see how he can recover from this. And I can slowly just tick up on scenario now at this point. As long as I can prevent him from scoring, then there's really nothing else he can do. Unless he goes for an assassination, which is exactly what he tried to do. It was a bit of a cheeky assassination. He told me afterwards it was probably about a 60% chance of pulling it off. So what the trick is with Kaya 2 is that the dog that she comes with, at some point during the game, she can then just teleport to wherever the dog is. So the trick was that the dog, which I was not too worried about, actually has Pathfinder, who just ran up almost into base contact with Nemo, and then his Warcaster then teleported across into melee with Nemo on a full stack of Fury, and just started wailing on him, and actually left him on about 3 boxes, I think. So this was completely unexpected to me. And as he said, he had about 60% chance of doing it, but the dice just weren't in his favour after the first couple of rolls. He rolled very poorly on damage, unfortunately. No problem hitting Nemo, but I had a bit of problem damaging Nemo. He just didn't manage to pull off the assassination, but it was a bit of a last-ditch desperate attempt at this point. Yeah, and after failing doing that, he's parked Kaya next to Nemo. So on the following turn, I did try and do it in a more elegant way, but by pulsing with Thunderhead, and trying to take her out in that way, but I couldn't quite get the distance. And because she was in melee with Nemo, the best way to do it was actually for Nemo to do some attacks, boosting to hit and boosting to damage, and was able to take her down pretty quickly after that. So I think this is probably one of the only times I'm ever going to have the opportunity to assassinate an enemy warlock in melee with Nemo. But yeah, all in all, quite an interesting game. My feat turn was pretty devastating, and yeah, in this case I didn't really have to worry too much about the scenario game because the attrition went so well. It's quite interesting in this tournament that I went up against two opponents, both of which his feat was a +3 armor bonus for all of their armies. And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that Nemo doesn't want to see. He really wants that +3 swing for damage when he can get it. He would like to see a lot of infantry, and then his feat probably wouldn't make that much of a difference. And he wants to see heavies, but he wants to see them without good defensive tech like smoke walls and plus armor. Anyway, so moving on to my final game. So 1-1 and lost 1 at this point. It's the final game of the day, as there was only 3 games in this tournament, and I drew Legion. I haven't played against a lot of Legion, but only ever times I've played against Legion I've lost. So I wasn't looking forward to this game, especially with a lot of confidence. And it was against a caster that I have never come up against before. That's right, it was Saeryn 1. So it was Saeryn 1 with some melee heavies. Legion's quite well known for their ranged game, but I think these were all generally a melee heavy battle group. I don't know the names of the war beasts, unfortunately. But 2 Hellmouths there with their ridiculous deployment, able to park in the zones. So that's his main chance for scoring on attrition in this game, probably is scoring that middle zone with Hellmouths, or at least stopping me from scoring using the Hellmouths. And everyone knows how bad Hellmouths are, or rather good they are. But I wasn't 100% scared of them because I've got this no push, no pull battle group spell, also on Thunderhead with Jake's with a sidekick. So I've only got the Journeyman Warcaster's Firefly that's vulnerable to that movement shenanigans. So I think that removes quite a lot of the Hellmouth's power. Although those Hellmouths are very difficult to remove because they have impervious flesh. So you generally have to boost on your damage rolls just to get sort of a normal damage roll on them, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, they're very good scenario pieces, pretty good on attrition as well. So this time my opponent got the first turn, which in the case of my list is never ideal. I generally want to get the first turn, but I chose this side because I've got that house that I can hide things behind on scenario. That's pretty handy. And the right hand zone there is a little bit more accessible from my side, although I knew that it would probably be my Storm Striders that would be scoring the zones, if at all, in this game. I went for the Pathfinder bonus on my objective, just in case I needed to give a Pathfinder to one of my jacks so they could get through a forest, for example. I actually completely forgot about that during the game. It might have been quite handy. I measured that trench on my opponent's side, and it wasn't not within 12 inches of that table edge, so it was actually a pretty useless trench to have in your deployment zone. Yes, so that's why I went for this side. And my opponent went first and skewed over a little bit onto the right hand side, maybe just to so that they could have their Hellmouths spaced out a little bit, because one of them needed to be just towed into that centre zone. And in order to try and buy myself a bit of time, I skewed over to the opposite side just to put a bit of distance between me and all his stuff. So here's his first turn. Pretty standard first turn, just trying to protect himself using tentacles there. So all the tentacles within shooting range for me, but because they regenerate, so I can shoot them up and they'll just come back. So it's not too much of a problem for him, and that just gives his army a little bit of space to get in position ready for the next turn. And here's my turn. So yeah, just being a little bit cautious. So I didn't have enough space to, because I was a little bit further away, I couldn't really shoot any of the main bulk of his army. So I really just took out more or less all of those tentacles from the Hellmouths that were in front of my army on that side, at the same time as just moving up as quickly as possible. I believe my Firefly at the front there is parked inside the zone. I think he's towed in, was just able to get that far ahead. Yeah, and just trying not to get charged by my opponent before my opponent's third turn. Not much else to say, I don't think. I did try and kill one of the Hellmouths with my Storm Striders, but I just couldn't roll very well. I think I rolled particularly badly in this game generally, but yeah, I just couldn't quite get the damage to take down the Hellmouth. So my opponent decided to feat on this turn. So that's what he did, and he moved one of his beasties up, put him inside, I think, some sort of spell that protected him a little bit. I can't remember exactly what that did. He brought back a few tentacles and then kind of just grouped up his guys for the scenario game, just getting into the zones to make sure that when the scoring started on my turn that he would be preventing me from scoring, automatically getting points on his turn. On my turn. Yeah, and he's feated, as I said, which means that that beast that's sitting in front of my army is on armor 23 at the moment. So having learned my lesson with Nemo, and if your opponent is doing an armor buff on the whole army, then it's probably not a good idea to feat, because you're really just neutralizing his feat rather than actually doing any damage. So I decided to wait a turn and not bother feating this in this part of the game, and really just tried to play for scenario, just to stop him from just running away with the scenario game before I got a chance to do some serious damage to his army. So as you can see, I really spread out my Storm Strider on the left. He went right as far into that corner as he possibly could. He ran, he didn't bother shooting. And that's, as I said, that's a charge distance away from his left-hand beast there, and I was kind of counting on him not charging that, and also forgetting that he would get pushed back after one attack. The right-hand side, I didn't have I was trying to cause a bit of damage on the right-hand side with my other Storm Strider. Maybe I should have got into the zone. That might have been a better idea. Because at the moment it means that he can just score on my turn, which is always a pretty stupid way to give away points. But nonetheless, he did manage to do that on my turn. And then, as I said, the rest of it's kind of spread out. So I've got one Firefly hidden right behind the house and just towing into the zone, hopefully making that impossible for him to score on his turn. The other Firefly on the left-hand side has got his toe into this zone and is just trying to just be annoying, and meaning that he doesn't just have to kill the Storm Strider to get into that zone. Then I've got Thunderhead and Dynamo just a little bit further back, just trying not to be the ones that get charged on his next turn. Yeah, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't feat this turn. I was just saving it up for if I could get away with buying another turn in this game without losing on scenario. Then yeah, I was just saving it up for that. And I also used my Lancer to do a Force Hammer Slam and get that beast that was inside that circle. I can't remember exactly what that circle does. Slam him out of there, and I think I did some pretty decent damage to that beast as well. I think took away a lot of his aspects, but as it's hordes, they can just heal that up on the next turn, get him back up to fully functioning health. Other than that, yeah, so I'm just trying to keep alive in the sense of the scenario. So on my opponent's turn, yeah, he managed to take out all of my lights. So there wasn't much left, but they did a good job of screening my damage-dealing heavies ready for my feat turn. But he's doing pretty well on scenario at this point, so he did manage to clear out the circle zone. I didn't put enough models in there, unfortunately, or the right kind of models, unfortunately. He was able to use, I think it's Typhon. I think he's got like a dragging shooting attack, which he was able to use on the Firefly that was hidden behind the house, drag him across and take down the Lancer and the Firefly, although it did take both of his heavy war beasts there to be able to do that. Yeah, on the left there, that other Firefly got taken out by that other war beast. That was the kind of easy pickings as opposed to the Storm Strider. So the Storm Strider on the left there did a good job of preventing him from scoring on that zone. But he's still scoring over on the right there, so this puts him up to 2 points. and he's got another point in the middle, so he's on 3 points at this point, which is pretty scary. It means that if I don't start scoring some points, then he's going to run away with scenario. Luckily, I'd saved my feat, so that I used this as my feat turn, and it was fairly effective. I took out all of his heavy war beasts that were on the front line there. So I think it's Typhon, I think he's called, and is it Ravagors, the other two? They all went down pretty handily. Thanks to Thunderhead and Dynamo and one of my Stormstriders, the one on the left there. I even think Nemo was able to get a few shots off this time, although he's staying as far back as possible. The Stormstrider on the right was able to tow into the zone and tried to take some shots at the war beasts that were standing there, but I think he fluffed his rolls, didn't do too well. Even with that super boosted damage, he wasn't able to take out one of those very fragile Legion war beasts over there. So I was able to clear out the left-hand zone and score there, but I wasn't able to completely clear out any of the other zones. Although now Dynamo is preventing him from scoring on the center zone, and my right-hand Stormstrider is preventing him from scoring on the right-hand zone. So it's coming down to a bit of a grind at this point. He is going to have a problem finishing off the scenario game, and I have to try and finish off his army or do an assassination before he gets the chance to win on scenario. But he did his best. Those Hellmouths, they kept on producing those tentacles, and they keep coming back. They're really great units. Over on the right hand side you can see he managed to very cleverly leverage all of his attacks from a tentacle and that light war beast and that flying heavy war beast, bearing in mind that they were getting pushed away as they were hitting my Stormstrider, but they still managed to take it down. He calculated through, and he knew that he was going to get pushed away with each of them, and he worked it out and gave them each enough attacks just to be able to take it down nevertheless. Although it's quite interesting that it forced him to commit quite a few beasts there just to be able to do that. Dynamo and Thunderhead still sitting pretty and preventing him scoring on the center zone. So he gets one more point, but and he's prevented me from scoring on the left-hand zone. So he's up by one more point, so it's 4-1 at this point. So I really have to pull something out of the bag here and do a lot more attrition. Otherwise, I'm definitely going to lose on scenario. And it was at this point that I realised that instead of trying to shoot war beasts with my Stormstrider over on the right-hand side, I probably should have been trying to shoot his objective. That would have been a way of just preventing him from being able to pull a final scenario victory out of the bag. So on my turn, I managed to clear out the left-hand zone. Thanks to Thunderhead, he's pretty handy for taking out those high-def solos. I didn't manage to completely empty that zone. I think Dynamo fluffed his rolls against the Hellmouth, wasn't able to keep going and destroy that, so I wasn't able to clear out the center zone. So as the board looks at the moment, all we're doing is we're each scoring a point on the right hand and left hand zones. The center zone is not being scored. So at the moment we're each just increasing by a point every turn, and I'm slowly whittling his army away. I've probably got enough left on the table to do assassination on the next turn as well. So he has to be a little bit careful. And it was only after I positioned the Stormstrider and Thunderhead that I realised that all he needed to do to win on his turn was to kill my objective, score on his zone, and then that would be enough to put him 5 points ahead. He'd already spotted it at that point, so that's what he tried to do. He was trying to move in with Saeryn and do spells to take down my objective, but unfortunately didn't have the range to move and do that and get through the water and all the crazy angles that he would have had to have done. So he abandoned that plan. At this point, the clocks are running pretty low. I think I clocked over to him when I had less than a minute left, and so he just tries to secure his position and try and prevent me from killing him with an assassination, which would be pretty handy for Thunderhead to be able to do, as he can just sort of walk up and then pulse, and then automatically hit, and then same as with Kaya 2 game, he would have been able to probably take down that low armor Legion Warlock. And so yeah, my opponent managed to clock himself in the end. So he was so busy concentrating on trying to attrition my army that he didn't pay quite enough attention to the fact that he was so far ahead on scenario, which meant that it was actually me that should have been in danger of clocking myself. But yeah, unfortunately, he didn't think that through at the end of the game there. And so despite being behind on points, he actually clocked himself and allowed me to win the game. So it was a bit of a disappointing way to end the game. I really felt that this was an experienced player, and that he looked at my list and immediately realised that I had a pretty weak scenario game. So I felt like he probably deserved to win this matchup. He certainly played better than I did on this game. But yeah, unfortunately that clock was pretty brutal at the worst of times. So it was a pretty hard fought battle, and I won due to my opponent's mistake rather than my own skill. So that's not always the best way to win, but it's still a win. And so overall it was a pretty good tournament. I've been rambling for quite a long time now, so I'm going to leave it at that. And hopefully you can look forward to hearing Leon's take on his games and Marcel and what he did on the same tournament. All in all, it was a pretty good tournament, and a shout out to Raphael for organising it. Cheers, buddy.